Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, Mike Elko, the Texas A&M Aggies wrapping up their spring game. Shout out Mike Elko for actually having a spring game, televising the spring game, and kind of giving us a feel for where this Texas A&M team sits heading into 2025. Now, look, as many of y'all know who've been following this sport for a while, spring games can get ugly at times. We're Michigan fans. We just watched a very ugly spring game earlier this afternoon. Dill, the new faces that are coming into this Texas A&M program, whether it's the true freshmen, whether it was the transfer portal additions, that's what stood out to me the most. I mean, you talk about the defensive line, Tyler O'Neidham. We're going to talk about him from Iowa State. He's going to be a difference maker. Deion Hayes, TJ Searcy, true freshman Marco Jones. You saw a lot of new faces that are going to be going into their first year for this Texas A&M team, at least in the spring game. They're going to be difference makers for this team in 2025. Want to, kind of open up the floor, run down the roster, talk about where these position groups sit, what names flashed before we get into it. As always, to the Texas A&M fans, appreciate you guys. It been really fun, covering this team in the transfer portal period. Now talking about these players, putting on the pads and the helmet. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, my biggest takeaway on the offensive side of the football, number one, what frustrates me, and you know this, I was pretty much complaining about this the whole football game. The offensive line rotations, so they split these two teams up. You had like your starting guard playing next to a walk-on tackle, protecting Marcel Reed. Like, it was just a little bit disruptive because the offensive line was so shuffled and you're dealing with some injuries. So it's hard to really grasp where the offensive line sits. The pass protection was sloppy at times. The run game at times was non-existent. But these wide receivers, that's kind of the storyline for me, Dale. I think Mike Elko identified that, hey, we think we can win football games with Marcel Reed if we build an offense around him and we put the pieces around him. These wide receivers are going to be way better than they were in the 2024 year. At least that's my take coming out of spring ball for Texas A&M.
Yeah, and it's about the playmaking. It's about the ability to
Yes.
make plays after you catch the football. And again, you saw from both Craver and you saw from Casey Concepcion, and that's probably the thing that stands out, especially because it is a little bit more in the Colin Klein style of
Yeah.
offense, being able to get the ball to your guys in space and let them work. Like, again, I don't know that Texas A&M is going to have a super elite vertical passing attack. I don't know that that'll be their bread and butter.
Yep.
But at least you're going to lean into what Marcel Reed does. He does a really good job working the ball into the middle of the field. And these guys, when they catch it, they were making plays.
This wide receiver room better fits what Marcel Reed wants to do with the quick releases, short intermediate route tree, and what Coach Colin Klein wants to do in terms of speed and space yards after the catch. Last year, your best wide receiver, Noah Thomas, one was kind of inconsistent, but no more importantly, he was just a big body that worked vertically down the field and didn't provide a ton else. Now you got a bunch of different wide receivers who do some different things, but the biggest takeaway for me is these wide receivers, when they get the football in their hands, are dynamic and they can make plays. I'll shout out Isaiah Williams, made a couple of really nice contested catches. I'll shout out Ashton Bethel-Roman, who we knew was having a good spring. He's going to be a contributor. No, I think your three starting wide receivers are KC, Terry Bussey, and Mario Craver. Ain't no question mark about that. That's a really, really fun group. But Dill, I think you have a couple other wide receivers who are probably starting to emerge. Let's talk about Marcel Reed. Now, he's like a lot of these other quarterbacks that we're evaluating in the spring game. Look, Marcel Reed's not built to ball out during a spring game because they don't let him play a lot of backyard football. They were blowing a lot of plays dead when he was getting outside the pocket. What he needs to continue to do is manage the pocket. Look, we know you're a great athlete. You can make people miss. You can extend plays. You can pick up the chains with your legs. Needs to get a little bit more comfortable sitting in there and pushing the ball down the field. At times a little bit jittery, a little bit quick to kind of pull his eyes down and go be an athlete. We love that you can do it. Can you walk that line a little bit more effectively of, hey, I'm going to trust my pass protection and I'm going to look to push the ball down the field? Now, the offensive line wasn't doing him any favors in terms of not being that kind of guy, but that's the step I'd like to see Marcel Reed kind of really take going into 2025.
And that'll frankly be a multifaceted thing. I think offensive line needs to play better. Probably the one thing I think you're actually worried about maybe is that right tackle spot. I still
Agreed.
don't know who's going to be that guy.
Yeah.
Like they just can't go with Crownover. I don't see how they can go with him as the right tackle again.
Yeah.
Ruben Father, I thought he played okay, but again, we've seen kind of both those. I'm not sure either of those is the answer. In Lamont Rogers, I'm not sure he looked totally ready either. So that's probably my one
Yeah.
glaring question on the offense side of the ball is who's going to play right tackle because they need to be better there.
Yeah, and I think you also have to run the football better, and stay out of those third and long situations and continue to keep Marcel Reed ahead of the chains. Like, Mike Elko wants to run the football. Coach Colin Klein wants to run the
And
football.
honestly, I think they should be fine there. Like, because like at least your three best
Yeah,
are your interior guys, Basantis,
yeah,
Colonu, and Armage. Like, they're the best offensive linemen
yeah.
on this football team. I think all of them can move guys around. They can run the ball from that unit. But again, there is no answer for really poor tackle play. So that right tackle spot, I probably think is that one
Yeah,
needs.
and maybe you have to address that in the portal, and maybe not. We'll see. I mean, we were both looking for Lamont Rodgers to maybe show he can do it. I don't think you left the spring game comfortable with
Now,
him being your.
Sankre Afua, I wouldn't have thought in a million years he would be out there at tackle.
Yeah,
He moves really well. Again,
yeah,
maybe he doesn't have premier length or he just doesn't
yeah.
have the premier length, but he's a guy like at least from a movement standpoint, he moves the way I'd like tackles to be able to move. So I kind of do wonder what they can get from him. He's playing left tackle kind of in place of Trey Zune here a little bit. Kind of interested to see what
Yeah,
they can
maybe
do with
he'd be more comfortable playing out there on the right side. Yeah, that's not a bad point because it was. I mean, he got beat a couple of times by some veteran edge rushers, but you kind of like the feet that you saw out in space. Defensive line, Dale, I'm leaving a little bit more confident, especially
him.
on the inside of this defensive line. I thought DJ Hicks looked the body type wise the best. I think he's cleaned up the body type a little bit. He is getting off the line of scrimmage and being a little bit more powerful at the point of attack. We know Albert Regis can play. The star of the show here was Tyler Oniedem from Iowa State. So funny. I remember breaking this kid down, and so I buzzed back the Iowa State film when he committed to Texas A&M. And my take was, I think Texas A&M is just trying to get a depth piece. A guy that can be a 20, 25 snaps a game, give you a solid rotational piece on the inside of the defensive line. My expectations are higher for this kid now going into 2025. Like he was the most impactful defensive player that you saw in this spring game. Really good off the line of scrimmage, living in the backfield. Dill, and you can say that for a lot of other names on the defensive side of the football. I thought Deion Hayes, the transfer from Colorado, thought he looked awesome. Thought TJ Searcy looked pretty damn solid. I was really impressed. You talk about from a pure
He might be
evaluation.
bearing the lead. I mean, that Marco Jones, like, wouldn't have
Yes.
thought he'd be an immediate impact
Yep.
guy, but he was dominating too, as
Yeah.
was Landon Rank. Like, they had some young guys playing really good football as well as some of these transfer guys.
Yeah. DJ Sanders, DJ Sanders certainly looks the part. You walk away, you knew Cassius Howell. I think you were excited about Rylan Kennedy. I'm walking away with, look, the defensive line on paper last year was really, really good. I feel like it never played to what we thought it could have in the 2025 year. Like individually, they were all very good football players, all going to be top 100 picks in the NFL draft. Never felt like collectively that defensive line played good enough. I like what I'm seeing on paper, and you're hoping that you can see a little bit more of like, hey, collectively playing better up front. But you're right, Marco Jones wasn't really sure if he was going to play off-ball linebacker, come off the edge. We're going to add Marco Jones to this depth chart because he looks like he's going to play for Texas A&M. Linebacker play was solid. Dill, secondary, not a lot of throwing windows. Sticky in man coverage. Thought you were disciplined in zone coverage, which was the problem last year. Like zone coverage was a disaster for Texas A&M. I'm not all that surprised. This is a group that's pretty much just running it back. And you add a guy in Lyle Helmfill, like sneaky addition for Texas A&M in the offseason, who I think provides a lot of value in the secondary. You got the pieces. Now you got to put it together as a unit. And I left saying, hey, when Texas A&M did have success on offense, which was far and few between at times, I thought the secondary was doing a really good job in terms of contesting every ball down the field.
Yeah, I did. That's probably what stuck out. It's just like tight throwing windows, like that play Kevin Concepcion or KC Concepcion made early in the
Yeah.
game. Like good throw and good catch, but like yeah, you're right there. Like if you make offenses play that type of game, the only one that I think Ruben Owens out of the backfield was
Yeah, it's
that
the
one
only
bust. Like
bust.
you probably would have preferred not to see, but that's almost in a sense like a good thing that stands out in my mind. It wasn't like all day we were watching like, oh, they were leaving guys wide open. Like man coverage was good. I thought they were for the most part playing the ball in the air, which was felt like another issue that they had last
Yes.
year. So again, you certainly saw some steps. Now that's going to be a unit, especially because Des Ricks I thought played pretty good. Des Ricks is one of the guys like I
Dude.
feel like I'm very keyed in on because I like Julian Humphrey. I'd probably prefer Des Ricks to win
Well,
that start.
but that's the thing is like you can say that, but Julian Humphrey is very very talented too, coming from Georgia. I mean that's 6'1" plus 200 plus that runs a 10.8 in the 100-meter coming out of high school. Will Lee, Des Ricks, and Julian Humphrey, those are prototypical NFL cornerbacks. They got the athletic profiles. Now, which of them are going to kind of put it together? I, I, again, was it the cleanest spring game we've seen? No, and no, this is probably
I
our
don't think I've
15th.
seen a single clean spring game. I feel
I
like
was going
all
to say, we've been breaking down spring games for our weekends the
doing
last
what they
couple of
do.
weeks, and it ain't that clean for anybody. But I kind of left saying you added a lot of really good football players. Like the new faces coming into this team, I think will contribute and play good ball for Texas A&M.
And the young guys, that was another like
Yeah,
even like we didn't talk about Noah McCall, but Noah McCall like really good too. So I thought your young players were playing really good football, which again certainly excites you because that's kind of the goal with Mike Elko is
yeah,
to get his crew in there
yeah,
and be able to develop guys up and
yeah,
make improvements like Des Ricks making big improvements. It feels like in some of those other DJ Hicks making improvements at least on on the surface. Like again, like we'll probably have to evaluate
yeah.
it all in the season, but DJ Hicks like physically looks more like
What you
what he
want him
is.
to look like, yeah. And you made a good point. I mean that's the first Mike Elko class, that 2025 cycle. And I was impressed with a lot of the true freshmen that we saw. And then again, you talk about like we are building this thing slow. This ain't going to be Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. We ain't going to try to have a flash in the plan year and then go back to being 6-6. And Mike shot a little ricochet at Ole Miss there.
I know.
We're building this thing the right way, and you kind of got that sense. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.